Hello YouTube! It's been, once again, quite a while, I'm aware of the fact. Truth is, I've been monstrously busy this month. Not only have I had a fair bit of work thrown my way, which is very nice, I've also been incredibly busy with personal projects and so on and so forth. The novel is claiming the vast majority of my attention at the moment, and taking up a hell of a lot of my creative and intellectual energy. Which I would otherwise reserve for YouTube videos and so on and so forth. So today the stories want absolutely nothing to do with me. It's been the first day like that for a very long time, but haven't managed to write a fucking sentence today without it looking like a slug trail across the page. It just isn't working. So what I thought I'd do is take the opportunity to create a video about a subject which has been quite prevalent on YouTube of late in a roundabout way. It relates to this whole debate that has been going on with regards to transgender individuals and to a wide variety of topics, actually. In point of fact, I'd say it is one of the topics that all others relate to in one way, shape or form. It's a huge subject, and one for which there are very few, I'd argue no answers whatsoever. There's nothing clear-cut here. There's only postulation, theory, ideas, and a hell of a lot of questions. And it's a subject that continually and consistently obsesses me in almost every aspect of my existence, and that is the means by which a sense of identity is determined. How do we as individual entities determine a sense of identity? And is that not misconceived? Is that not that concept itself misconceived? The very notion, the word identity, the language that I'm using there seems to be inadequate to defining the phenomena, simply because, with regards to my own subjective experience of the phenomena, there's no such thing. There's nothing as certain or as concrete as identity. There are only shifting interplays of idea, of perspective, of position, which we collectively refer to as identity. The notion of identity, it kind of suggests that there is something concrete, that there is this thing that each of us has which we can refer to as our identities, which can be identified by its parameters. The interesting thing is, I don't think that's the case. I think that identity isn't a thing, it's not an object that can be defined or determined. It's a process. It's a process that begins when the first sentient thought flickers into being in our minds, and ends when the last thought flickers out. And that is a huge problem for us as a species, because we are monstrously lazy. We want this thing to be simple. We want there to be parameters. We want there to be channels by which our sense of self, our identities can be determined, down which they can be directed, to which we can point to and say, yes, that is what I am this, I am that, I am blah 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 blah. And culture, the very notion, the way culture operates collectively, seems to be predicated upon this desire, this need for a sense of identity, whether it is prescribed or imposed or whatever. It is what results in the creation of specific ideologies, such as political ideologies. Religion is probably the most noticeable and blatant byproduct of this desire, because religion in general provides for us a sense of tribal identity. That's what it's there for. We can define ourselves as this particular type of Christian, as this particular type of Muslim, as this particular type of Buddhist, and it provides those parameters. Some more so, some are more constrictive than others. I mean, the Abrahamic faiths in particular have they prescribe very definite parameters by which their advocates and adherents can define themselves. Prescriptions of behaviour and perspective, even of thought and imagination and feeling, which is why many advocates of those ideologies, certainly of their more extreme incarnations, tend to come off as rather neurotic with regards to certain factors of their existence. It's because it doesn't work. Trying to place a template onto the notion of identity means that you automatically attempt to sever bits of it. It is, in many respects, akin to... The best metaphor I can think of for it is something akin to infant circumcision. It's cutting off vital bits of the human being, of the individual, in order to suit a particular prescribed template, which it will never fit anyway. And just for the record, I find infant circumcision, where there is no good medical reason to do it, abhorrent. I think it's a really revolting practice. I think what it's doing primarily is beyond any notion of sort of the physical discomfort or the aesthetics or whatever. That I'm not bothered. I'm not that concerned about. But what bothers me about it is that it is imposing a sense of tribal identity upon the child. It's a stamp of ownership. It's like saying this child belongs to this tribe. It belongs to my tribe. It belongs to its parents' tribe, without waiting before it can give consent. It's a way of forcibly directing that child's sense of self-definition so that they can't get away. So because it binds the anatomy, the physical anatomy of the child to their sense of tribal identity, which is a vile thing to do. Would it be acceptable, for example, would it be acceptable if we came across a culture whose tribal traditions consisted of branding a mark into the child's back or into the child's face, which marks it as part of this particular tribe? Would that be acceptable? I don't think it would be, personally. I really want those that are responsible for doing this to put their money where their mouth is. Wait until the child is of an age where they can decide whether they want to be part of this tribe or not, and whether they want to have the physical marks that go along with it. If a fully cognizant adult decides that that's what they want to do, then that's their business. But children, no, it's not. It's not your business at all. It's not your right, insofar as I'm concerned, to so forcibly impose a sense of tribal self-definition upon the child. Anyone who regards their children as anything more than an extension of their own sense of tribal identity should demonstrate more respect for their children as individual entities, as blossoming consciousnesses. You see, this is the way I look at it. If I ever had children, which I probably won't, for a whole number of reasons, then all I could do is provide them with information and descriptions of what my positions on particular aspects of life are, and I would try very, 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 very hard to make them as objective as possible. If they asked this, I would say, well, this is what I think and why, but I would be very careful to demonstrate that this position or that position, as all the positions I hold on anything are protean and subject to change. I might be wrong about everything. So, for example, if my child came to me at a particular age and said, I think I believe this, say, I don't know, they decided that they believed that they were a Christian or that they were a Muslim or whatever, then that's fine, that's their business. We would have discussions about it, certainly, but it's their business, it's not mine. If that's where the process of their sense of identity has taken them, then fine. It's theirs, it's not mine. It doesn't belong to me, much as I might want it to. It's not mine. And the raw fact of the matter is I might learn from them, their experience of reality, the factors that influence their sense of self-definition might provide new contexts by which I can determine mine. I'm not so arrogant. I hate the definition between child and adult. I fucking hate it. There's no such thing as adults. There are just really big, hairy children, and that's it. There's just these entities, these progressions of consciousness and of identity. That's all. But it seems to me the factors that determine identity, or that feed into the process, I really should say, are so manifold, are so complex, that it's almost impossible to have a reasonable discussion about them. There are factors, certainly in our formative years, the influences that we are exposed to as a child, which determine a great deal of what we eventually become, or of how the process manifests at this particular point in time. I'm very cognizant of myself as a progression. This thing sitting before you now, talking at length to the camera, is just this particular point in the progression. The next moment it will be different. Every single frame that you see here is a different entity, technically, because something different is feeding into it. New contexts are blossoming constantly, new sensations, new experiences, art in particular, creative expression, is a fantastic way of determining new contexts by which identity can be determined, because what art is another consciousness trying to express its own process of self-definition to other consciousnesses. And sometimes what those consciousnesses express has resonance with others. Sometimes it doesn't at all. And that's really what all this is about. Every interaction that we have, either be it on YouTube, be it through the process of a novel, a painting, a piece of music, in an everyday conversation, that's what we are doing. We are trying to find new means of either developing self or reinforcing the sense of self that we want to have for ourselves. That's the neurosis. That's where the divide is. There is a particular neurosis in our species which ultimately is a result of fear. It's the fear of being cast adrift. It's the fear of not having something definite, of things being protean, which is the fundamental fear that from which all socio-cultural problems, all interpersonal problems, all problems relating to individuals spring. Everything comes from that. It's the fucking terror of realizing that we are not fixed, and that as a result, because consciousness is not fixed, therefore reality is not fixed. It's why so many of us fight so hard to defend what determines our sense of tribal self-definition. Usually it's a particular traditional tribal ideology. And tribal ideologies, traditional ones, are always by nature exclusivist. They provide a sense of self-definition, a synthetic template of self-definition that relies upon the identification of outsiders, of a particular enemy who is by definition either threatening or inferior. And this encompasses everything. This encompasses churches, it encompasses political organisations and ideologies, it encompasses philosophical ideologies, every single thing. Anything by which you can say, this is me, I am that kind of philosopher, I am that kind of academic, I am that kind of atheist, I am that kind of Christian, I am Christian, I am Muslim, I am blah 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 blah. It's a sad echo of the adolescence of our species, and it's determined a great deal by the limitations of our biology, unfortunately, because we all do it, every single one of us, even those of us who can identify to a certain degree the fact that consciousness and identity are protean and are constantly changing in response to external stimuli, to cogitation, to ideas, to images, to dreams, to thoughts and feelings, and so on and so forth. Even those of us who can identify this have certain factors to which we cling neurotically, like a frightened child clinging to mother's apron strings. YouTube is a fantastic place for examining that very phenomena. A fantastic place. I mean, just look at the so-called atheist communities. I'm not going to say community because there isn't just one, there are many, and they often tend to conflict with one another. It's a fantastic example of how it advertises itself as against this factor of our existence, as being higher than it, and yet continually demonstrates that it suffers from it as well, that it is a byproduct of it. The very notion of community is that. The moment you have a community which is built around a common position or a common idea, then you have the tribe. And from that point, the more baroque aspects start to accrue, the tenets of behaviour, the saints, the icons, the texts, the dogmas, and so on and so forth. It's with regards to the concept or the position of atheism specifically, or particular concepts of atheism, because there's not just one, there are many, just as there are many concepts of Christianity and of Islam, which is something that many atheists do not like to acknowledge. You get tribes accruing around these particular common aspects or definitions of atheism, and they then conflict with other forms of atheism, and the tribes accrued around them. And what you ultimately get is an interplay between two purportedly opposed but very similar dynamics. What religion provides for the advocate, the tribe of atheism, whatever the one it happens to be, whether it's the one accrued around this individual or around this concept or around this particular book, it functions dynamically in the same way. It feeds a sense of self-definition. I am an atheist, and therefore I have an objective view on reality. By definition, I see more of reality and of what reality is than the Christian. Bullshit. Utter bullshit. It's the process by which you determine that position which is important. And if the process is flawed, then the actual position itself is completely meaningless. Completely meaningless. It can be as illegitimate as one which states there are dragons in my back garden, or that there is a specific personal creator entity that grants wishes, or so on and so forth. Now, I at the moment apply the term atheist to myself because it works. It in its most rarefied, pared down form, in its meanest definition, that is the non-adherence to any notion of God or gods. It describes my position on that particular phenomena. I have no good reason to believe that there are gods or God or whatever at this present moment in time. But there are many ideas I entertain, and there are many not positions I hold as such, but certainly many potential perspectives that float around in the ludicrous, insane morass of contradiction that is my mind, that I'm sure many self-described atheists would find completely ludicrous, or which they would regard as contradictory with my position as an atheist. And that's, for me, that's perfect, that's good. That's how it should be. It means that I am constantly being challenged. It means that this little label which describes this particular aspect of my positions or my consciousness or whatever, my perspectives, is under siege constantly. Which is the way it should be. I don't want to be certain about anything. The moment I find myself reacting with certainty towards something, the moment I find myself reacting tribalistically, when I feel that I have to defend this position for whatever reason, I stop. I try to stop. Because 9 times out of 10, it is as a result of this innate tribalism. It's not because the idea is being challenged, it's because the idea or the position has parasitically infiltrated itself into my sense of self-definition, and therefore any attack or criticism upon it becomes an attack or a criticism upon the individual, the consciousness, the identity. And this is certainly a more entrenched phenomena amongst the religious, because religion is an accrual of this very parasitic phenomena. That's what religion is. It is ideology that parasitically binds itself, infiltrates itself into the individual consciousness, into the sense of self-definition, and therefore criticisms, no matter how mild-mannered, no matter how well-meaning, of the ideas and the perspectives that the religion promotes or consists of, become attacks upon the individual. They become attacks upon the sense of self, which is why you get incredible violent emotional reactions. It's why you get reactions of offence, because it is offensive to the person for whom this parasite has become part of the sense of self-definition. It is offensive. You are poking and prodding very intimate areas of their metaphorical anatomy, their abstract anatomy. And this is something that many self-proclaimed atheists on YouTube really miss. Now, in a roundabout way, I want to take this opportunity, because it is a related subject, to answer one of the questions that I was asked as part of my recent questions and answers video. I will be getting round to that, by the way, when I've got the time. But this is a big one. It was asked by Rowan Fortune Wood, whose channel I suggest you check out. And Rowan asked me, what do you think is the biggest problem facing your culture at present time? And given infinite resources, what would you do to countermand that problem? This is the biggest problem, not just facing our culture, but all cultures. It's the apathy, the fear, and the neuroticism that comes from being placed with the responsibility of writing one's own narratives, of determining one's sense of self. Here in the UK, we are suffering from a very particular kind of ideological malaise. It's as a result of being an old society, I think. It's because the society has run the gamut of ideology. We have been entrenched with so many different kinds of pervasive ideologies over the centuries. We are now in a state of post-ideology in many respects, where the traditional means by which identity have been prescribed or imposed are not necessarily dissolving. That happened a long time ago. They are now fermenting. They are this morass of fermenting shit. And the problem we're having is that so few of us are willing to take up the responsibility that decay has left us with, which is we have to author our own narratives now. There's nothing legitimate, there's nothing out there that will say to us, you are this. This is how you define yourself. You are this kind of Christian. Therefore, you behave like this, you believe like this, blah, 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 blah. You are this kind of political activist or philosopher. So therefore, you think this, and you behave like this, blah, 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 blah. That isn't there anymore. And the problems of that are becoming manifest in our culture, whereby we don't know. We're sort of casting about, directionless, because we're so very afraid of what it means. When you pick up that pen or paintbrush, when you start to author the narratives by which you define your own consciousness and your own sense of self-identity, that's an experiment that will never end. It will never end. Until the last thought flickers out in our brains. And even maybe not then. Who knows? Who knows? It means that your life, your existence, is defined by this struggle. And we would rather, a great many of us I think, would rather just sit amongst the rot and the shit and the fermentation rather than taking it up. And I think that is one of the biggest problems facing our culture at the moment, simply because so many other problems that result in a wider cultural and political sense derive from it. Now, as to how we can countermand this, I don't know. I don't know. It would take a sea change. It would take a profound socio-cultural shift. It would take a renaissance, a way of shifting and doing away with the preconceptions, the stagnant preconceptions concerning education, concerning children, concerning politics, concerning money, society, economics, philosophy, thought itself, the notion by which we define and determine identity and identities has to change. It has to shift, and that will take something profound. I don't know what it will take, but I'm working on it. Bizarrely, I'm working on it. I mean, this is what a lot of my literature is about. A lot of my work involves vagary and surrealism, and it often involves characters who don't know who they are or what they are, or they find that the parameters by which they presume to define themselves are somehow illegitimate or collapse completely, or ripped out from under them, and they have to go about building themselves. They skin themselves, basically, sometimes quite literally. I mean, there's a lot of metaphysic, magical transformation, a lot of liminality and lycanthropy and all of that wonderful stuff in my fiction. And I'm not naive enough to think that what I write will initiate some grand change. I mean, by God, it would be wonderful if it did. I would be so happy, beyond any sort of like financial benefit that would come to me. I'm not interested in that. But if it could, at the very least, initiate the beginnings of this in one or two people's lives, that would be fan-fucking-tastic. But I think the only thing we as individuals can do is keep having these discussions, keep having these interactions, keep having these conversations through whatever medium we can. And who knows, hopefully, eventually, something interesting will result.